time for discussion. I hope you're inspired to raise some issues or questions for our speakers. There are mics, I think, maybe between. So are there any questions from the audience? It's a big room, so maybe you feel a bit hesitant to speak up, but please do. That's why we are here. And we have plenty of time for discussion. Yes.
Yes, hello. Thank you for all the wonderful presentations. And I actually had a question for the first presenter regarding the digital biomarkers. And I thought it was quite interesting when you showed the added value, the added diagnostic or classification value next to the socio-demographic variables, and then the added value in which you showed it was somewhat better for cognitive classification. But what I found super interesting was that it didn't really add much to all the other markers, and also the added value was very modest, also leading only to a moderate area under the curve. So I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit upon those results, and is it indeed that moderate, or would you expect more?
Yes, thank you very much for this interesting question. So in this study, we were looking at the domains of frailty and at the domains of depression and on the domains of cognition. And as you say, I just commented the cognition part. We found very good correlations with frailty measures. There the discrimination performance was very strong. Interestingly, and this was also a bit a surprise to the study team, we did not find good discrimination when it comes to depression, and this conflicts also a little bit the literature. You know, other researchers have found there better correlations. What we assume is that this can be explained by the participations, these 45 seniors that we included for this study.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, this question goes to the first presenter too, and it goes in the same direction somehow. So you presented the different patterns between the 83-year-old healthy person and the 83-year-old person with cognitive impairment. So this is the question is, so this is difference between two people, but are you going to, or do you have differentiation in one person? Meaning, do you have longitudinal data that shows that there might be very active person with not very regular daily routines that change over time or that don't change over time? So this is the first question. And the second question is related to this too. In the implementation phase, do you also have anecdotes or comments on false positive and false negative results? Like, I'm coming there and nothing happened, or someone fell and we did not notice? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So the first question on the longitudinal data, we don't have that yet. But of course, it's a crucial part that will have to come. Others have looked at it. If you look at, I'm sure you're familiar with the UK Biobank data and so on. Now, the second question regarding
the sensitivity and specificity and basically in using it.
Yes, sure. You were asking about false alarms. Yes, especially in the hospital setting, that's a big topic. And for the nurses, it's very annoying when they are directed to a patient rooms and it was not really necessary. And the data that we have presented so far was that we had 1% of false errors. We only had very few exceptions where a critical situation was not detected yet, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe some questions also for the other presenters that you want to raise? Yes?
Hi, I would have a question about the VR study. I was wondering whether participants experienced any VR illness like numbness and stuff like that, because I know that it's quite a phenomenon for other participants.
Yeah, thank you for your question. And that's something that comes up a lot, that people are quite curious as to how it's received, I guess, from a point of view of simulator sickness or motion sickness that people tend to experience when they use VR. I was quite fortunate actually that all of the participants in my study didn't actually experience any serious negative side effects. So we monitored while we were in the home, and I guess that's the advantage of having myself in the home when people are using it, that you can monitor how they're reacting to virtual reality in the moment, but also kind of for an hour afterwards. So we were quite fortunate, but I think that's down to really careful consideration before implementing virtual reality. So how long somebody's using it for, having the person with dementia potentially sitting down while they're using the application on a swivel chair. So having really clear conditions in order to minimize that risk is really important. And we spent a huge amount of time working with our PPI group in order to make sure that those conditions were in place. And actually, if you want to have a look at my publications, they kind of go into that in a little bit more detail in terms of what those conditions were. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Okay, I have a question myself for you, Esther. Do you have any idea about the views of care professionals on online peer support for people with dementia? Because I sometimes experience in clinical practice that these professionals can also act like kind of gatekeepers because they have their own ideas and views on what fits with the needs. Did you encounter this in your studies, or have you ideas on that?
We didn't speak to professionals directly about their views, but this is certainly something that we are considering for future steps, because what we noticed from some of the participants in focus groups and in interviews is that they said, well, I told my doctor that I found out about this amazing online group, and I brought flyers and I told them, please share this with others, but they were not interested. And I remember one woman telling me that this was saving her life, and her doctor was not interested in distributing any flyers that she brought. And this is just one example of the interviews that I did, but I think it suggests that there's a need for further research into this, because we also noticed that from the people who were referred by their doctor, that this was actually a very positive experience, and it gave them more trust in the online group, and it gave them a bit more confidence to join the group because they were brought into connection with the facilitator by the professional. And it can be quite daunting to join a new group by yourself or to explore a new platform. So yes, I think this is definitely something for future research.
Something that you recognize, Lizzie, or you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you all saw me nodding because that's something that we experience a lot with the Partner in Balance program as well. It all comes from a good heart because they want to protect their clients. They don't want to burden them with something new or maybe something that they think they cannot handle or use anymore. Because Partner in Balance is also online, and I often hear, no, my clients, they don't know how to use technology, and that's not for them, and they're already so busy. But we always try to explain in the training that it's so important to highlight that this will help people get over, or not get over, but deal with a very busy life when you're challenged with a dementia diagnosis. So this is not to burden people, but to help people. And I think also to give it as one of the options. So if people don't have any iPads or iPhones or anything like that, then also give other options offline. But of course, give it as one of the options and let the people choose for themselves.
All Esme.
So I just want to ask the Partners in Balance team a question. I was fascinated by the length of continuing time that you've been over years and probably years to come with your cost effectiveness study. And it's a design question. So my colleagues in the pharma industry since COVID are very excited because they are, well, we learned that we can get our vaccines out fast. So the phases that people use, phase 1 to 4, were not used. And now people are thinking about how they can transfer drugs across and from one condition to another without having to go through all the heavy research that has gone on, and trying to consider what kind of negative effects you might have or not have while you're down that journey. Because one of the things we couldn't do was test negativity and what happened. So my question is, if we were trying to reduce the lengthy processes that we go through with these complex interventions that we use with the MRC framework and other ways, have you got any ideas, having been down that journey, told us all about the pitfalls and tips and whatnot? Is there anything we can do to speed up work so A, we can get it out there to the people we serve, and B, to get commissioners and policymakers to recognize that the waste of long-standing research, by the time you've finished it, all the systems could have changed, and then you're kind of trying to implement things when things have changed 10 years later. And I'd just be interested in your thoughts, actually. You may not have a definitive answer, but you've been looking at the whole journey, have you not? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think it's something that we are all struggling with in technology, because technology is rapidly changing, and if you have to wait for more than 10 years for something to be implemented in practice, then it's already old school, and there people are using something new. So I think in research, it's important to also look at other types of study design. So not only randomized controlled trials to evaluate these types of technologies. And I was talking about including stakeholders from the beginning. I think policymakers are people that we should also include from the beginning. And start with this first question: is this project worth pursuing for the government, for instance, or for people that are going to pay in the end? Because if they're included in the beginning, then hopefully they're also invested to speed up the process and to adopt it earlier than 10 years.
Okay, I'm not
Sorry,
sure.
but you're still bothering with the cost effectiveness study, which will take some time. I see.
We are almost there. I'm not sure that I see all hands in the back. So if you have questions and you sit somewhere in a corner in the back. Oh, yeah, Jan.
It's way in the back. Oh, and it sounds... I have another question building on the question from Esme to Lizzie. And partner imbalance is, of course, an important intervention because it builds on the resilience of family caregivers, and that's important to delay the transit to nursing homes. But there's more initiatives that are similar. We've heard about eye support from the WHO. We've got the Dementia and Nu in Flanders. We have the work from Mary Mittelman. Shouldn't we be comparing all these similar interventions that have the same goal to make sure that we invest in the right one, in the best cost-effective intervention? And is any study being done in that area, in that comparative area?
I'm not sure I completely got it from way back there, but I think your question was, Jan, if we shouldn't compare or combine all these interventions that are working on the same.
Compare.
If we make a choice as a private consumer, we tend to compare stuff. We use TripAdvisor to select a hotel to stay in. Here we've got at least 4 similar interventions that have the same goal. Where's the comparison? How can a country that has no intervention that strengthens the resilience of family caregivers, how can they choose between the different available options? And I've mentioned 4, but there may be others.
There are many interventions looking to strengthen caregivers and to improve their resilience, but not all interventions, like we learned from Hannah Christie's work, are available after the research period is over. In our review process, we found so many interventions with a similar goal, but they apparently all ended because the research budget was over and there were no commercial parties taking on the lead or marketing this intervention. But there fortunately are a few that are still available, and I think it's important that data banks and patient organizations like Alzheimer Nederland, for instance, list them on their website so that people using them know what to expect and what to get out of these interventions to make an educated decision.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, I think they're not per se similar. They overlap often, but I think they can also be complementary. And I think it's important that we also look into that, how they are complementary, so people are better able to choose. Another thing I want to highlight is that we have recently published a paper on adherence of e-health interventions to support caregivers. Golnaz Atevi did that. And we found, for example, that the coaching element, and we have often discussions about it because it makes it also a bit difficult to implement it, but the coaching and the interactive element of, for example, partner imbalance is very important in the effects, but especially in the adherence of caregivers with online support. So that is, I think, a crucial element to look into when you choose interventions. Esther.
Yeah, I think in this there's also a bit of similarity. What I try to highlight with peer support is that, like Marjolein said, having the different options, and different people have different preferences. So, for example, partner imbalance might be suitable for people who find it difficult to leave the house, who maybe live with someone with dementia who can't stay at home alone, so they might benefit from that remote platform. Whereas something else I heard from a colleague, sometimes with these online interventions, there can be the lack of privacy at home, where maybe someone wants to speak openly about their difficulties, but then the person with dementia is there and it can be a bit uncomfortable. So they might prefer an intervention that is in person somewhere else. So I think it's actually really great that there is such a wide variety of different interventions supporting people in a different way to get to resilience. So,
yeah, I agree. In the back with the white shirt.
Thank you. Hi, my question is for Esther. Thanks for your brilliant presentation about the online peer support. My question is about ground rules for the peer support group. And was there any thinking about, what topics could be allowed or not allowed to be brought to the peer support group?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And actually, having good ground rules is something that came up frequently in the different sub-studies that we did, both for text-based platforms, but also for video meetings. And that is actually also something that we have included in the guide. So something that people said is that for the video meetings, for example, it's important that the ground rules are established together with the group, and that there's also a procedure in place for when someone appears to be very distressed during the meeting or very agitated, or if someone drops out of the meeting suddenly, that the group facilitator checks in with them afterwards, or if there is maybe a difficult conversation between members in the group, that the group facilitator addresses that and doesn't leave it be after the meeting closes. And with text-based platforms, often these ground rules are published on the homepage, so that can include things such as to be respectful, not to share certain type of content. For example, some groups prefer not the advertisements of medication, for example, or harmful posts that will be removed. So this is something to keep reminding members of, whether they're in a video group or on a text-based platform. So yeah, thank you. That's very important.
Jane, you had a question?
It was just to add to what Lizzie said, really, which is that I'm obviously working with the Care Coach program, which is led on from your partner's imbalance. And implementation is so contextual. And you raised that in your presentation, Lizzie, but I'd just like to stress to everyone else how important that is. And so when you're talking about different interventions, they've all been developed in different contextual environments, and therefore they all have different mechanisms that are working differently within both societal and populational contexts. So direct comparisons are very difficult, and I think it's about focusing implementation on the context within which you want it to operate.
Other questions? No? Nobody? Well, then I would like to take the opportunity also to highlight the INTERDEM network, because 3 of our speakers are part of the INTERDEM network, and it showcases, I think, also the topics that we are interested in, especially in the task force on technology. And it also relates to the remark that you made, Jan. It's really important that we collaborate in such networks also to be aware of all the different interventions that we develop, and also to see how we can compare or exchange or collaborate with each other in the network. So if you consider to become a member, please visit the booth here on floor 1 or visit our website. And I very much like to thank our excellent speakers of today. Thank you so much. Big applause for you. And thank you all for the active participation in the discussion, and enjoy the rest of the conference.